Can you believe we made it through our vacation Bible school? And we did great things there, and there were a lot of smiles and happy children who got to be pirates and enjoy their time together. And we were able to take a breath this week. We relaxed a little bit. The boat sailed out from the auditorium, and things have gotten back to the normal look. And we, for a good week now, have just been able to just, whew, feels good. Well, guess what? 3 weeks from today, guess what we're doing? It's carnival time. That's right. In just 3 weeks, we're going to be having 100 to 200 kids over on our lawn that are going to need us. Now, one of the things I love about our church is that the rule of thumb is that you have about 30% of the congregation does about 80 to 90% of the work. Except we're kind of a little bit of an anomaly for that, especially when it comes to our carnival. Believe it or not, when we do our carnival, we average about 90% of our congregation comes out to help. And believe it or not, we don't function well if we don't have 90% or more of our congregation come out and help. So, some of you all, you're new members here. You've been coming here and visiting for a while, and you don't really know what this whole carnival thing's all about. Basically, what we do is we opened up to the foster community and all the community here in Council Bluffs for any child who has a need to be able to have school supplies to start off their school correctly, that we will provide that need. And so what we do is we make a huge carnival over here on the side lawn. We have about 20 or 30 different games. There's popcorn, there's hot dogs, there's cotton candy, there's a jump house, there's the fire trucks, there's the whole 9 yards. And we pretty much run the whole shebang, except for the fire department. They won't let me drive the truck. But other than that, we pretty much we do the stuff. And it's become a staple for our community knowing that we do this. And for the foster community, it is one of their things that they mark as their special thing that they do every year. And a lot of times we don't really realize how much of a difference we make. But if you have been a foster parent before, you've worked with some of them, normally a foster parent doesn't just take one child, and it's not just one person that they need, they take multiple. And you may not realize it, but I do, because I have 5 children in school right now. And for me, just getting the school supplies normally is about $350 to $400. So the idea of being able to come somewhere where my kids can go and eat cotton candy and jump in a jump house and play games and win school supplies and my budget stays intact is huge. But to be able to do that, we need a few things from you guys. And this is the first part of the 2-part step. The first is this: we need school supplies. There's certain things that we need. And out in the foyer, there's a list. It looks just like this. It says Back to School Carnival. It has a list on how you want to do it. For some of you all, if you're a hands-on shopper, there's a list there and where you can find the items that we need. You can go right to the store. You can enjoy filling up the cart and take care of that. For some of you all, you say, well, I'm working a lot. I don't really have time for that. You all can go on Amazon, for those of you all that are Amazon shoppers like my wife, and it doesn't count on your budget because your husband doesn't see it. And you can just buy as much as you want and get it sent to the church, and it'd be great. Or for others, if you don't want to do that, you don't want to use that modern technology stuff, you could just give us a donation, and we have some members here that would be more than glad to go take care of those. There are certain things that have already been donated. We have a large number of certain items, so we know those are going to be taken care of, but we always fall short in other areas. And so what we do is Lori goes over and she gets the list of school supplies for all the schools. And then she breaks them down for us so that no matter what school they are coming from, we have the supplies that they need. And so I want to ask for you all to really think about this a lot in the next week or two, to be able to start buying and procuring school supplies and bringing them to, we'll have a table in the foyer for us to start filling up. It makes all the difference in the world to be able to do that. The second thing I need from you guys, we have flyers out there. If you have children in your neighborhood, if you have children that you work with, or people that your kids maybe go to daycare with, or different things like that, your grandchildren, invite them to come. Give them a flyer and let them know it's here. It's absolutely free. We want them to enjoy the evening. And thirdly, the last thing you need to do is to sign up, because we need your help. Whether that be a greeter when they first come in, or somebody who's running a booth, or somebody who's supplying the extra needs, or set up or tear down, We need you. If your skill is a hot dog, we will use that skill. If you can scoop popcorn, we will use that skill because we do need you desperately to be able to do that. So be thinking about that. I asked Lori, I said, are the sign-ups here today? And she said, no, not yet. They'll be here Wednesday. And I said, okay. So I need to let you know, Zach, I'm letting you know too right off the bat, okay? There's some jobs you want to do, and there's some jobs that you do as a service of love. If you sign up early, you do the jobs that you want to do. If you don't sign up early, then I call you and guilt you until you do the service of love. So you make sure that you get in on this, and you make sure you do that. And what I mean by, like, if you may want to be in the dunk tank, the kids really love that idea. But if you don't, you might want to sign up early. I'm just saying. Anyway, so that's kind of coming on August the 11th. Mark your calendars, get it going, get ready to do this, and enjoy your time on that. It's a great time seeing just hundreds of kids laughing, getting to visit with families, and we have opportunities when we do that to share the gospel with people and get to know each other better too. So make sure you're a part of that. We've been going through a series talking about our anchor, the anchor of hope. This idea that we anchor all of our hope on the rock that is Jesus. And this morning I wanted to talk about something kind of really special, and that is that we need to understand that storms are coming. You know what's so funny? Depending on where you live, that means different things to you. Me growing up in the South area and being in Tornado Alley, storms are coming means every spring, early summer, there's going to be tornadoes. It's just what it is. It's not that big of a deal. Even up here at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, we hear the siren of testing because we know that someday a storm is coming. And so for me, it's not that big of a deal. Whereas whenever we moved up here from the South in the first winter that we were here, we were watching the news and it said, big snowstorm coming in, 13 to 15 inches, which you guys are thinking, yeah, it's a snowstorm. And I was thinking, it's the apocalypse coming. And so my wife and I, we hop in the car and we drive over to the grocery store. And we're like, we're going to have to buy everything because it's all going to be gone. Because in the South, if an ice storm or something big happens, everything's sold out. You can't get anything. And I mean, I'm loading up the cart, and I can't understand why there's nobody else in the store. I'm like, man, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'm buying like $300 worth of groceries and stuff because, power's going to go out. We're going to lose it all for the whole time. And we go home, and it just comes down. And I love it because I love snow. You all know that. And I'm thinking, man, we're going to be stuck in here for days. This is going to be awesome. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear this weird sound. And I look outside, and all the roads are paved, and they're cleared, and there's nothing on the roads. At 9 o'clock in the morning, there's like 1.5 feet of snow in my yard, but I can get out at any point that I want. And I was like, oh, I guess that's why nobody went to the grocery store. Right? But in my mind, the storms are coming. We have to be prepared for it. Down south, everybody has a tornado shelter, so you don't think anything about it. Earlier this summer, I was telling you guys we were at the in Nebraska Furniture Mart, and we're shopping. My wife and I, and the sirens go off, and there was a tornado that was hitting over by Lincoln, and we were in Omaha, and I mean it went mass panic in the furniture store. We're locking up the store, get in the basement right now. Everybody's going to die, kind of thing. And my wife and I are like, okay, so we just kept on shopping. It's like, not a big deal. It's not that far. It's still far away. They said, well, you got to leave or you got to get in the basement. I was like, well, I'm not getting in the basement with you people. You're crazy. So I was like, we'll go home. We'll just drive home. So we get out in the car. I almost got ran over in the parking lot from the ladies just like, there's a tornado coming. Kind of thing. I'm like, lady, settle down. It's going to be okay. How we understand that storms are coming makes all the difference in the world. And we need to understand that in life, we are going to be in this boat of life that God has put us in, and we are going to go through struggles. There are going to be storms. It's not a matter of if, they're going to happen. Every one of us are going to go through them. So if we know that the storms are coming, the question is, are we prepared for the storm? And are we listening when people are telling us that the storms are here? In Matthew, as Jesus starts his ministry, he goes through this incredible sermon. And it's Matthew 5 and 6, and it's beautiful. But he goes through, and what he basically does is he walks through this idea of here are storms that come up in your life, and here's the solution for your storms. Here's the anchor that you can hold on to. Here's something that can change your life in the midst of all these storms. And he just kind of walks through them one after another. And he just kind of quickly goes through them. He goes through the idea of the storm of feeling like you don't have enough, the storm of worry, the storm of anger, the storm of people being wrong to each other, the storm of people cheating on one another, the storm of going through separation from other people. He goes through all this storm and he gives answers and answers and answers. And then he goes into chapter 7. After he's done all these storm solutions, he says this: therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Now, I want you to see that everyone who hears my words, hears the siren, hears the call that the storms are coming. Everybody that hears my solutions to the problems that you're having, if everyone who hears where to place their anchor, they're like the wise man who built his house on the rock. We sing it with our kids just a little bit ago, right? The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had the foundation on a rock. But everyone who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell like a great crash. Unfortunately, all too many times we see this picture. Oh, just a minute. There we go. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Have you seen this picture before? The rains are rising. The people are told, you need to get out. It's not safe. This is not where you need to be. You have another place to go. You have another option. Nope, I'm going to ride it out in my house. This is where I've always been. This is what I've always done. I'm staying right here. And inevitably, when you watch this, when you see flooding, this is what happens. And you'll see the news people showing somebody sitting on top of their house, and the waters are still rising, and there's somebody coming along with a boat to pick them up. We need to understand that there are choices to be made on a continual basis. In the midst of everything else going on in your life, there are still choices. There are choices to be made. There are things that need to be done. And we can either ignore them, we can ignore what God tells us is our safety and our way of doing things and where we need to go, or we can just follow them and be okay. But the beautiful part is that even when we make bad choices and we find ourselves in distress, God does not leave us there. That we have a God that is not going to abandon us. God doesn't look at us as we are sitting on top of our house in the midst of the flood because we made bad choices and we didn't follow what He asked us to do and go, well, you get what you deserve. No, God's the God, just like when we see these pictures, that gets a boat, goes to the house and says, would you like a ride? Because I still love you and I'm still here for you. Too many times in our lives we make these decisions that aren't the right ones. And then what we do is we think there's no hope, that there's nothing else left, that there's nowhere to go. But that's not the God that we serve. The God that we serve looks at it and goes, yeah, you made a really bad mistake. Yeah, you're in the wrong direction. But there's still something to this. Life's not over yet. There's still more to be done. You know, we've been talking a lot about shifts, and I thought it only appropriate that we could get in Acts 27 and 28 today. as we look at Paul, who, if there was ever somebody who was living in a life of storm, it was Paul. And he literally, in these two chapters, goes through a horrible experience being at sea. And in Acts 27, you realize that as we start out, that Paul has already been arrested. Paul is already a prisoner. Paul has already been going through suffering when we hit into Acts 27. It says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some of the other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from Adriatum, about to sail to ports along the coast to the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. To Articus, Macedonian from the Thessalonica, was with us. And as we start out in chapter 27, they get in a boat. They're going to go from place to place, and he starts this journey going through. And what's happened is that they've kind of started a little bit late. And at that time, they knew there were seasons to sail and seasons not to sail. And they were at the very tail end of it. But they went ahead and decided they would go anyway. And as they started going through their journey, they started going from stop to stop, working their way up. And they started to realize that it's getting really late in the journey, that it's probably not the best time. And Paul, who is not a sailor at all, as we go a little bit further, says these things. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because it was now after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be dangerous, disastrous, and bring great loss to ship and cargo and our own lives also. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. And here God is using his apostle to let people know this is not a good idea. But instead of listening, they went their own way. They trusted in what somebody else said other than what God's direction is. And we do that too. God tells us what we need to do sometimes, and sometimes we listen to other people. We listen to work. We listen to our culture. We listen to other things, and we think, well, it's probably going to be fine. And God says, I don't think that's a good idea. We say, yeah, we know, but these experts say that it's going to be okay. And we go along our way, and so they do. And as they set off into voyage, as you read in the scriptures, they go, and for 14 days, the seas are just crashing on them. It's just destroying the boat. They've ran ropes underneath the boat and tried to tie it together. They're trying to hold the ship fast. They're throwing stuff overboard. They're doing everything in their power to try to save the ship. And Paul, who warned them ahead of time, he has the incredible opportunity now to go, see, I told you so. Now you're going to get what you deserve. God's going to protect me. I've read Jonah. I know what can happen here. I'm not worried. But he doesn't do that. It says, on the 14th night, we are still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about at midnight, the sailors sensed that we are approaching land. And you need to understand before this that they had lost hope. And Paul said, don't lose hope, because an angel of the Lord came to me, and he told me that we're going to be fine. And now these men who had no belief in God at all, who had no trust in God, who didn't listen to Paul initially, now have been given some comfort. And Paul says, we're going to be all right. You've been fighting this for a long time. Get something to eat. Get a little rest. We're going to be okay. They took surroundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, the surroundings again, and they found it was only 90 feet deep. Fearing that they would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. They've been in a storm for 14 days. They've tried everything they can to survive this storm. They're on their last leg. They are to the point of giving up. And God comes in and says, I'm still here. I'm still here. Then at that point, they go a little bit closer, and now they've dropped anchor, and they're just saying, if we can just get through tonight, And there are some of us that there are times when we literally make these mistakes in our lives and we are crashing and we're burning and we're having such a horrible time, and God says, I'm still here. And we literally go, okay, God, you're still here. I'm praying to you because this is all that I've got. I've got nothing left. If I can just hold on for one more day, just one more day. I'm going to try my best, Lord, to hold on today. And maybe that's where you're at today. Maybe where you're at today is just going, I just came here and I said, this is it. Life is so hard, and I came here because I'm looking for something. And God says He's going to be there for me, and I just came here and said, God, today's the day, man. You got to give me something. Because I'm holding on for dear life, and I just want to survive today. And so that's where these sailors are. And as time goes on, the next morning they wake up and they see land. And so they decide to move the boat towards the land. They get stuck in a sandbar. And Paul literally looks at them and says, okay, here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to swim for it. And they finally start listening to Paul, and they do. They swim for it. And those who couldn't swim, they grabbed a piece of wood and they floated on it. And we get into Acts 28, and it says this: once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because of the raining. It was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood and he put it on the fire. A viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Now, I want you to imagine this. Now, Paul, he's been imprisoned. He's been put on a ship. He's been shipwrecked. He's had everything possible gone wrong with him. Now, when he's finally on land, when you think, boy, the storm is finally over. I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to grab some wood. I'm going to have a nice warm fire. My stomach's finally not churning. He throws it in there and he gets bitten by a viper. And you look at that and go, man, how many storms can you go through? When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, and not just a nip, literally hanging from his hand. Several years ago, I was directing a camp session. I had one of our teenage boys was walking back from our Starlight devotional. And as he's walking back, he felt something hit the back of his ankle. And it was kind of burning a little bit, and he looked down, and there's nothing there. Kept on walking to his cabin, and by the time he got back to his cabin, his ankle had almost doubled in size. He'd been bitten by a copperhead. It had hit his tennis shoe, and one fang went in his tennis shoe, and one fang grazed his ankle. Took him to the hospital. Spent all night with him screaming in pain. His legs swelled up just enormous. The shots and everything he had to go through was just ridiculous. And it didn't even get a sink in. So I can't even imagine what a viper that bites and just holds on, just dangling from his hand, dangling from his arm. They said to each other, this man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live. And you see here that the people of Malta, they didn't know God. They had their own gods. And they looked at that and said, man, that guy's got to be one bad dude. Because who gets that kind of luck? Who gets shipwrecked? Who's a prisoner, shipwrecked, and gets finally back on land that gets bitten by a snake that's going to kill him? That guy has got to be a problem. But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead. But after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. And Paul, in the midst of all his struggles and his pain, and I don't want to discount thing here, I'm sure a snake bite hurts. I mean, Paul literally was feeling pain in the midst of everything. But God was still using Paul in the midst of his pain. As we finish out in 7 through 10, it says, there was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from a fever and dysentery. Paul went to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies that we needed. And there are three things I want you to catch from this story when we talk about being prepared for the storm and knowing storms are coming. The first is this: Paul was content in all of his circumstances. I want you to understand there's a difference in content and light. Paul was content. I don't think any of us like the storms that we go through. We don't like it when our health is not doing well. We don't like it when our relationships are suffering. We don't like it when we don't have enough money to do the things we want to do. We don't like it when something happens to our vehicles we weren't expecting. We don't like those things. But Paul was content. If I'm in prison, I'm in prison. If I'm on a ship and they don't listen, I'm on a ship and they don't listen. If I'm shipwrecked on an island, I'm on an island. If I'm bitten by a snake, I'm bitten by a snake. But in all things, I'm still content because I know that God is working. And in the same way, I need to be able to look at it and go, my health isn't that great, but God is still a great God. I'm still here. I'm still happy. I don't have the 401k that I thought I did last year, but God's still a good God. He's still good to me. And He's still doing great things. And in the midst of my struggles, in the midst of my storm, I have the ability to change somebody else's life. See, because Paul took advantage of every situation, the bad ones and the good ones. In the midst of the ship, after they had not listened to him and he's in the middle of a storm, what is he doing? He's teaching them about God. He's showing them the power of God. In the midst of all this stuff going on, he's doing it. In the midst of the being up on the beach and being bitten by a snake, what's Paul doing? He's using it to glorify God. In the midst of not having whatever he needs and knowing that he's going to go further on to be in chains somewhere else, what is he doing? He's still helping others because it's bringing glory to God. And God will provide. And finally, God is going to supply everything that Paul needed. I love the end of what I was reading in 28 where it says, after the time had come when the weather had gotten better and they were ready to ship out again, the people of Malta supplied them with everything that they needed. They didn't have to. They owed them nothing. But God made sure that everything that they needed was there. And that's the God that we serve. In Romans 8:28 it says, and we know that in all things God works for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And I want you to understand that the storms are coming. They are definitely coming if they're not already with you. But God has an incredible plan for you. He is working right now in the midst of it. When you feel like you're alone, you're not. When you can't see a future, He does. Whenever you look at it and you think this is hopeless, He looks like this and He says, what an opportunity. Because God is waiting for you to allow Him to work in you. So yeah, the storms are coming. But there's sunshine around the corner. And great things are right after the storm. There's calm, and there's beauty after a storm. And that's what God is offering to you today. This morning, if we can help you in the midst of your storms, we can be praying for you, if we can give you any kind of encouragement, will you allow us to do that this morning as we stand and as we sing?